Hey guys, so in this video we are going to talk about Ruby and Elixir, so let's get into it. Now, I had a question the other day from a subscriber who was asking me about this move that we see that Ruby developers are coming over to Elixir and my thoughts on what's going on there. And I wanted to touch on this because I think that's a great question, and I also want to explain why I believe that a lot of Elixir developers are getting excited about Ruby. The Ruby developers are getting excited by Elixir for the wrong reasons. Just let me walk you through it. So, as a non-Ruby fanboy, because I'm not a Ruby fanboy, I've never been a Ruby fanboy, I actually think that Ruby is bringing... the thing that Ruby does well is not something that I am attracted to, but I still respect the language, and I respect the language for a very different reason as opposed to what I see a lot of Ruby developers kind of valuing, if you will. Now, we have to go back in time to a time when when Ruby gained that massive popularity that made it this beast to be reckoned with. Back in those days, you had a mindset in the IT community which was geared towards business value and engineering and sort of things of that nature. And Ruby is, if not, I'm not going to say it was the only language who did this, but I think it's the biggest contributor to it. Ruby was one of the first languages who brought about the idea that developer experience actually matters more than you might think, because it just used to be that way. It didn't. I mean, if you look at C++ back in the day, I mean, or C or whatever, these were not accessible languages. These were languages not built with developer accessibility, developer experience, and so forth in mind. They were built for a very, very different reason, and Ruby was solely designed to be a language that you would love. It was designed for happiness. And I think they did it so well that it changed the entire IT world. I swear to God, that's what I think. I think Ruby changed everything. They did. The mindset that the developers who are actually using the idea that performance and hard values such as that was the only thing that factored in software development was a mistake. It has been a mistake from the get-go. It's always been a mistake. Because, and I think that Ruby had it right, because the majority of applications that you build are, performance only matters in certain circumstances, like I'm talking like peak type of performances. There are very specific situations when that is the most important thing, but productivity and actually being able to produce business value, if you will, there's more factoring in than just the language itself or the code. There's so many more other things that makes a difference when it comes to development speed. And that's the idea that they kind of pushed. And with it, they changed, as I said, everything. The diversification became massive. And I think I know why it happened. And I also think I know why Jose Valim is starting. If he is doing this intentionally, he is a genius. I don't know if he is. It's such a hard thing to define whether or not the move from Ruby over to Elixir is one of necessity, or if it's a very calculated thing. It might be a little bit of both, but we'll talk about that in just a moment. Because when Elixir became this popularized thing and the adoption of this language, it started out with just regular people now being able to do software development or doing web pages, just as with PHP. Like, you had this adoption that made people feel empowered. You gave them the ability to be productive and actually enjoy themselves as they were writing their own software. And that experience or that adoption I think it lit a fire under the asses of all the more conservative languages, all the hardcore engineering languages. I think that they realized that they had been missing something. I think that Ruby taught the IT world that developer experience actually matters a lot. A lot. And I think that a lot of languages realized that you are actually a product. I think that, say, Java, for example, they realized that, hey, shit, it doesn't matter if we can do everything, because if we're not popular, or if we're losing the popularity context, or if we're not keeping ourselves relevant, we might actually lose, even if we are the better choice for a lot of reasons. And so that's a good thing and a bad thing, that this language war type of situation came to be, where languages are trying to create. You basically have trends. Ruby kind of brought this idea of trends, and well, it's not that they brought the idea of trends, but they brought the perspective that a language actually has to cater to its users, because the demand of the user is going up. Because it used to be the case that the consumer of the product wasn't the focus. It was actually the business value that was the focus. If you look at UX development, or UX and UI design back in the day, the amount of stuff that was on an interface was much higher. There was so much more clutter, because the designs and so forth were geared towards business value as opposed to simplicity and user experience. And that's the trend we're seeing today. User experience is the most important thing in UI development today. And the same thing is starting to became true for development. Accessibility and making a language adoptable and being able to be productive in a language became much more important than most other things in software development. And I honestly believe that Ruby brought that along. But now they are facing a problem. Ruby as a community has a big problem, because as with everything that becomes truly popular, you will get rivals. You will get competitions between, competition has arose between Ruby and everybody else, and they are losing that. And what's happened is that the other languages and the other standards have caught up. Ruby virtually, in my opinion, educated the entire world as to how important developer experience actually is. And now everybody is doing it. And the problem is that the core of Ruby now has to face off against somebody else starting a trend that they cannot cater to. They can't keep up. And we have gone full circle. The problem was that we didn't have developer experience, and we were all about business value and performance and hard requirements. But now we've come around, and the developer experience is pretty good in almost every single language that is modern today. And now we're back to performance again. And that's where Ruby has a problem, because they can't keep up. And they won't be able to keep up. They can't rewrite the entire Ruby ecosystem to be performant. That won't work. So that means that these other languages are now gaining traction, because they have now caught up to the developer experience that Ruby brought to the table. And that's the only leg that Ruby really has to stand on. That means that someone has to make Ruby performant, or you have to have a new selling point for Ruby. And if Jose Valim did foresee this, he is, as I said, he's a genius. Because there is one thing today that matters more than performance. Performance is absolutely one of the biggest trends in a lot of areas in IT, but there is one thing that every single company, everybody is interested in, and that is stability. Stability, uptime, having an application that can handle, that can have basically constant uptime, that doesn't require a lot of maintenance, that has the sort of simplicity to it that makes it just a joyful thing to maintain, because at small scale you don't have much problems. I mean, Ruby can handle absolutely most of what you want to do at small scale. The problem comes when it's at large scale. So Jose Valim he's a genius. Erlang, which is the language that Elixir is built on top of, is today one of, if not the most stable piece of technology that we have when it comes to uptime, when it comes to operations, when it comes to all of these things. It's the language of choice for the industry with the highest amount of uptime that you can imagine. It's basically a language that was designed for long-running real-time connections. It was designed in order to have virtually constant uptime and being able to deploy new code and all of this good stuff without losing that valuable uptime. And what's even more beautiful, it's so genius. Jose, if you're watching this and this was all in your head when you started thinking about Elixir, I want you to know that I have such respect for you, because Erlang as a language was never designed to be a broad language. It was not designed for mass consumption. It was designed for a very specific type of purpose, which meant, and I still believe that that is the case today, that it's not a bad language, but it's not as nice as it could have been. And if we're in the world that we live today, where most things are it's very important with developer experience, Erlang does not really cut it in general. So here comes the Ruby, or the Ruby community, Ruby developers, who are masters of making a language nice, or making a nice language that people love to work with. And they simply grab the potential and the power of the Beam engine, or the Beam, and all that power, they bring that in to their ecosystem, put a nice interface on top of it that makes it a nice development experience with basically all that good stuff that Ruby brought to the table, and now they have a niche. And the niche is that their application, Elixir as an application development platform, is among, if not the most stable piece of technology that you can have. It is the choice of businesses such as games companies, betting companies, where uptime and stability is more important than anything else. Which means that Ruby, or the Ruby developers, have now gotten a way out. They have a way to actually keep up with the trends. It is a political masterpiece. You have no idea how genius this move is. It is beautiful. Yeah, it's simply beautiful. So what I think is interesting is that the Ruby developers that I talk to, they are excited about Elixir because it's a nice development experience. Because of all of the beauty that they can enjoy in Ruby has been transferred over to Elixir, and it's a functional touch. But there's so much more to it. What I've just tried to describe to you, that's me telling you that Elixir is a nice development experience, that it has all these nice tools, and that it's supported by the Ruby community. That's you just giving Jose Valim and everybody who is contributing to that project, you're just giving them credit for the tip of the iceberg. Because you have no idea how genius this migration from Ruby over to Elixir actually is. At least from my perspective, it is absolute genius. Have a great day.